Imagine waiting 20 years for a publisher to remaster one of your favorite JRPGs, and the fans just get tired of waiting and do it themselves. And I do not mean opening an emulator and turning the resolution up to 4K. For this list, I wanted games where the community has created new textures, rebuilt interfaces, fixed translations, added widescreen, restored quality of life features, changed how battles work, or, in one case, built an entirely new engine around the original game. Some of these now look shockingly modern. Some actually play better than the versions you can officially buy. And number 1 is so ambitious that calling it a mod almost feels unfair. These are 7 classic JRPGs that fans have basically remastered themselves. Number 7 is Radiata Stories, and this one is especially interesting because the fan scene is still moving right now. The original PlayStation 2 game already had a huge personality, a living town, more than 100 recruitable characters, and a battle system where Jack was the only character you could directly control. Fans have been quietly changing all of that. There is a full HD texture replacement pack from VIII that cleans up the environments, character textures, and interface when running through PCSX2. But in 2026, the really fun stuff started happening on the gameplay side too. A new mod lets you switch control between party members during battle while everybody else keeps fighting under AI control. Another lets you remove Jack completely and run a 4-character party of your choice. There is even Save Anywhere work in progress. So Radiata Stories is starting to get something it never received officially. Higher resolution presentation plus modern flexibility in a game that has been stranded on the PS2 for more than 20 years. That is exactly the kind of project Fabled Cartridge exists for. At number 6, Dragon Quest VIII. The PlayStation 2 version still has a look and feel that a lot of fans love, but on a modern display, the original UI, fonts, and textures definitely show their age. The community answer is basically a homemade PS2 remaster. VIII created an HD texture replacement pack, and HuffleScuf built a matching HD interface and font overhaul around it. The project replaces the overwhelming majority of the dialogue and UI assets, while a separate 60 FPS patch can make exploration and combat feel dramatically smoother. The nice thing here is that the game still looks like Dragon Quest VIII. It has not been turned into a completely different art style. The colors, Akira Toriyama designs, and PS2-era charm are still intact. They are simply much cleaner on a modern screen. If you want the classic console version rather than another port, this is surprisingly close to the imaginary remaster Square Enix never made. Number 5 is Persona 3 FES. Yes, Persona 3 has since received an official remake, but FES itself still has a massive fan modding scene, and the result is almost its own alternate remaster. The HD Overhaul project replaces low-resolution interface art, portraits, maps, and many in-game textures, with a mixture of upscaling and manual redraws. Add widescreen support, community enhancement packs, and the famous controllable party modifications, and suddenly, this old PlayStation 2 game feels far less restricted than the original release. That controllable party change is especially important. In the vanilla game, your allies make their own decisions in battle. Fans decided that 20 years later, maybe Mitsuru does not need to cast Marin Karin at the worst possible moment ever again. It is a great example of what fan remastering can do that an ordinary graphics patch cannot: preserve the version people love while removing friction that has annoyed players for years. At number 4, Xenogears. This is where things start getting seriously ambitious because there are 2 different fan projects that can work together. First is the Perfect Works build. This is not just a visual filter. It is a configurable overhaul with an improved translation, bug fixes, quality of life options, rebalancing choices, encounter rate adjustments, and other fixes. As of 2026, the main script retranslation is complete, and the project is still receiving updates. Then you can layer emulator texture replacement on top. HD packs replace portraits, interface elements, and other artwork, while DuckStation renders the 3D side of the game at much higher resolution. The important part is that those 2 systems do different jobs. Perfect Works changes the game data itself. The texture pack handles presentation through the emulator. Put them together and you get something that feels much closer to a community definitive edition than a simple emulation setup. No, it does not magically rebuild the famously compromised second disc, but it does make the Xenogears we actually received feel much more polished. Number 3 is the original Final Fantasy VII. And this might have the single deepest mod stack on the list. Seventh Heaven has turned the old PC version into a platform for an absurd number of community upgrades. You can replace the field backgrounds with high-resolution versions, improve battle environments, world map textures, character models, menus, spell effects, and FMVs. You can run smoother frame rate mods, add modern quality of life tweaks, restore or retranslate parts of the script, and even add full voice acting through projects such as Echo S7. The strange thing is that once you stack the best projects together, this is not really the Final Fantasy VII you remember seeing in 1997 anymore. It still plays like the original game, but visually and technically, it can sit somewhere between preservation and a fan-made remaster. And because everything is modular, you decide how far to go. You can keep the blocky field characters and just clean up the backgrounds, or go completely overboard and rebuild almost every visible layer. Square made Final Fantasy VII Remake. Fans effectively made Final Fantasy VII Remastered. Number 2 is Final Fantasy IX, because Meguri Mod is probably the cleanest example of a fan project making an old JRPG look the way your memory insists it always looked. FF9 relies heavily on beautiful pre-rendered backgrounds. The problem is that the original assets were designed for extremely low resolutions, so on a modern display they can become a blurry mess. The Meguri mod rebuilds that presentation with much higher resolution background art, cleaner textures, and rendering improvements while staying remarkably faithful to the original aesthetic. Memoria then provides a powerful modding base with extra configuration and gameplay options, and there are optional higher frame rate cinematics, and even fan voice acting projects developing around the game. What makes this work is restraint. The characters do not suddenly look like they wandered in from a modern Unreal Engine remake. Alexandria still looks like Alexandria. VIII still looks like VIII. It simply looks like the version of Final Fantasy IX you thought you were playing when you were a kid. For a fan remaster, that is almost the perfect target. And number 1 is the Legend of Dragoon. Not because it has the prettiest texture pack. In fact, the community's full upscale project is still separate work in progress. It is number 1 because fans went much further than textures. Severed Chains is a reverse-engineered native engine for the Legend of Dragoon. This is not standard PlayStation emulation. The community has rebuilt enough of the game's underlying behavior that the original data can run through a modern engine on Windows, Linux, macOS, and handheld PCs. That opens doors normal emulation struggles with: near-instant loading, high native resolutions, true widescreen support, flexible controls, save-anywhere features, bug fixes, accessibility options, larger inventories, and the ability to play without Dart permanently occupying your party. The current development build is already the recommended way the project team distributes Severed Chains while they finish the formal 3.0 milestone, and future work is aimed at expanding the modding API even further. That is the difference between touching up an old game and building a new foundation underneath it. Sony may never give The Legend of Dragoon the full modern remaster its fans have been asking for. At this point, the community is increasingly making that irrelevant. And those are 7 classic JRPGs where fans have basically said, fine, we will remaster it ourselves. The part I love is that these projects are not trying to erase the original games. Most of them are doing the opposite. They preserve the art, the mechanics, and the strange little details publishers might change in an official remake, while fixing the things that have aged badly around them. And there are plenty more I could have included: Skies of Arcadia, Breath of Fire, older Tales games, and a ridiculous number of translation and restoration projects. So if you want a part 2, tell me which forgotten JRPG deserves the fan remaster treatment next. And if old games getting new life is your thing, subscribe to Fabled Cartridge. That is exactly what we are going to keep digging up,